The Sony 18-105 f4. That's the only lens you should buy. So like this video if you like it and subscribe if you want to see more. See ya. Welcome back to the channel, Filmmaking Homies. It's your boy Cody Blue, and obviously that intro was a little bit of a joke, but it's kind of true. I do really like that lens, and we're going to talk about it in today's video, as well as all the other lenses that I'm using for both my filmmaking and my photography, because by far the most popular question I get on all social media platforms is which lens should you guys buy? You guys are always asking me if I could only buy one lens, which one would it be? And that's a really hard question for me to answer, but what I can do is I can go through the lenses that I own, tell you what I like about them, what I don't like about them, different instances that I'm using those lenses, and hopefully that'll help you guys make a decision. So let's get into it. Now, we'll just kind of talk about lenses in the order that I actually purchased them, so not in the order of best to worst. So the first lens that I ever purchased for my A6300 is the Sony 35mm f1.8. Now, I actually shot my entire Tahoe 1 video with this lens completely handheld. So hopefully that goes to show you guys that you can shoot a whole video using just one lens. Now, I really like this lens a lot, but I'll be completely honest, it's not my most used lens. It's probably not even my third most used lens. I use it a lot for like detail shots and maybe some portrait shots with a nice shallow depth of field, and it's also in my bag in case I ever find myself in a low light situation, but more often than not it tends to stay in my bag. So what do I like about this lens? I like that it's f1.8. You get a nice shallow depth of field. I also like that it's a super small lens. It's very easy to travel with. You can just leave it on your camera body and it's not going to take up a whole lot of space. I also like that it has OSS, so it's a stabilized lens. It's great for shooting handheld. So I use this lens for a couple of different things, but I'm not using it too often. So number one, I think it's a great lens for portrait photos. If you guys are shooting photos, it's really good for getting nice close-up details with a nice blurry background. It looks super good for portraits, and I can highly recommend it for that. But for video, I'm using this lens a lot of times for my detail sort of macro type shots. So in my Banff video that I just put out, I used it for a lot of the shots of plants, the spiders, different things like that, but there weren't too many shots in that video, or really any of my videos, that use this lens. So while I do like it, it's great for low light, has a nice shallow depth of field, it's definitely not my most used lens. So with that being said, it's easy to carry around, so I always throw it in my bag just in case. Now next up, we have the second lens that I ever purchased for my A6300, and that's the 18-55mm kit lens. Now I talked about this lens in my A6000 video, and there was some confusion. Some people were saying that's not a kit lens, it doesn't come with the Sony cameras, but it's still a kit lens, even though you're right, it doesn't technically come with the Sony cameras. It's a kit lens because a lot of cameras do come with an 18-55mm f3.5 to f5.6, which is exactly what this lens is. So it's still a kit lens, and I think it's a pretty good lens considering the price point. It's really great for a kit lens. Obviously the build quality is not good at all. It's very plasticky and lightweight and doesn't really feel great to use, but the autofocus is super good. It works really well for video, and I use this pretty much exclusively on the A6000 these days. I don't really use it on my A6300 because I have the 18-105 that I'm shooting on, and it's just a lot better build quality, a better lens. But I do keep this lens on hand on the A6000, and it seems to work super well for video. You get 18mm, which is nice and wide, as well as 55mm at f5.6, and you still get a pretty shallow depth of field if you're zooming in, which a lot of times I'm zooming in for pretty much all of my footage. Now, I haven't actually shot, I think, not even a single photo on this lens, so I can't really talk about how well it does for photos. I can imagine being a kit lens, it's not going to be that sharp. It's probably not going to be the most amazing lens for photos, but you might try it out if you're looking for a zoom. I would recommend this if you're balling on a budget. This is a great lens. I still shoot with it to this day, mostly on the A6000, but quality lens, and it works well for me. Again, I think I picked this one up on eBay, so paid like just a little over $100 for it. So you guys might check it out if you have a limited budget. Next up, we have vintage lenses. Now, specifically, the vintage lens that I own is the Canon FD 50mm f1.4. So this is a super cool lens. It's fully manual, and originally I just picked it up to kind of play around and be creative and have a little bit of fun, shoot some photos and some videos with a manual vintage lens. Now it's super hard to stay in focus at f1.4 because if you move forward a tiny bit or backwards a tiny bit, you're gonna lose that focus, but overall it's a super nice lens. Now on the crop sensor, this lens is gonna have a lot more reach than it will on a full frame. The crop is 1.5 times, so 50 times 1.5 is what you're getting out of this lens, but you get a nice, super shallow depth of field at f1.4. It's a great mid to kind of long range lens for low light as well, because f1.4 is gonna let in a lot of light, and it's heavy enough, the build quality is super good that you can fly this thing on a gimbal, which is super nice. I used it when I was actually reviewing this lens. I put it on the gimbal and it seemed to work out super well. So I recommend the vintage lens, mainly because it's so cheap. I think I got it for like $50 on eBay. You can probably find one for about the same price, and it's fun to play around with. It allows you to be creative and shoot a little bit differently than you would before. So if you don't have a vintage lens, I really like the Canon FD 50mm f1.4. With that being said, I'm not using it very often, just very rarely. If I want to get creative and kind of play around with it, I'll break this bad boy out. So again, this is another one that I don't really keep in my bag, but I recommend you guys check it out and play around with it. And now we're getting into the lenses that I'm using pretty much all the time, and we're gonna start with the Sigma 16mm f1.4. So first off, the image quality on this thing is phenomenal. Even at f1.4, I am super impressed. Obviously, it's a little bit sharper at like f2.8 or f4, but even at f1.4, I'm totally confident in this lens that I'm gonna be able to get some great images out of it. So why do I like this lens? Number one, it's great for low light. If you guys are low light shooters, if you shoot concerts or you shoot in a nightclub, I would highly recommend this lens. f1.4 is gonna allow you to let in a lot of light and you're gonna get super clean low light footage. So it's a great low light lens. I also like the nice shallow depth of field that you get at f1.4. It kind of gives you a full frame look, although obviously we're not shooting on full frame. So don't get me wrong, it's not quite full frame, but it gives you a little bit of a full frame look. On the crop sensor body, it's about a 24mm equivalent. So it's a super nice lens. I really like the 24mm look, and I highly recommend this to you guys. But with all of that being said, I don't use this too often for videos. This is actually my go-to photography lens. I shoot almost all the photos on my Instagram with this lens because, again, I really like that 24mm look, and it just looks super good. It's gonna work super well. If you check out my Instagram, you'll see some of the photos that I'm able to capture with this. But this is my go-to photo lens. If I'm going out to just shoot pictures, this lens is on my camera body, and then I have my 18 to 105mm in my bag in case I want to get some reach on something that I'm taking pictures of. I do highly recommend it. It's a super good lens, but for me, it's mainly a photo lens. And lastly, my favorite lens for the Sony A6300 or A6000 or A6500, any crop sensor Sony, is the 18 to 105 f4. Now this is the lens that I'm using for 95% of my videos, almost every video that you watch on my channel, is mainly shot on the 18-105. So I'm using it for my vlog footage when I'm filming myself, you know, holding the camera in front. I'm using it for these videos right here, as well as my cinematic B-roll and almost all of my other shots. I highly recommend this lens to you guys. Number one, because it's so versatile. You get the nice wide angle look at 18 millimeters, but if you zoom all the way in to like 80 millimeters, 90 millimeters, or all the way to 105 millimeters, you get a nice shallow depth of field at f4. You're gonna get a super cinematic look, and the image quality is honestly really good considering the price that you pay for this lens. Now, another reason that I really like it is because it doesn't actually extend or retract when you're zooming in or zooming out. So it always stays the same length, which is perfect for gimbal filming. So now you have an 18 all the way to 105 that you can fly on your gimbal without ever having to rebalance. So that's another big reason why I almost never take this lens off of my camera. It's just so versatile and I really like it. Now, with that being said, it's not going to be the greatest in low light, obviously, because it only goes to f4. If you're wanting to shoot in low light, you need something like 1.8 or 1.4. The larger the aperture, the better for low light. But otherwise, this is by far my favorite lens. The build quality is amazing, the image quality is amazing, and just everything about it is so versatile that I'm confident I can shoot an entire day, an entire video with just this one lens. So for those of you guys who always ask me, I can only buy one lens, which one should I buy? I would say if you're mainly shooting videos, the 18-105 f4 is definitely the way to go, especially if you're flying on a gimbal. It's gonna work out for you so well. It's perfect for run and gun, and I'm confident that you guys are gonna really like it. Now, if you want one lens to shoot photos, that's hard for me to pick. If I could only bring one lens for photography, I would bring the 16mm f1.4. But it depends on what style of photos you're shooting. If you're shooting portraits, the 16mm is not gonna be your best option. You might wanna look at the 35mm or maybe a 50mm or even an 85mm if you're a big time portrait shooter. But for the style of photography that I shoot, the 16mm or the 24mm equivalent is the perfect focal length for me, and I really like it. But with that being said, I would not feel comfortable just carrying that one lens. So I'm always carrying at least my 18-105 and at least the Sigma 16mm f1.4. So those are my two favorite lenses. And I would say if you only have the budget for two lenses, definitely the Sigma 16mm and the Sony 18-105, by far my favorite lenses. I feel like I could shoot on those lenses for pretty much forever and never feel like I'm missing out on anything. So there you go, guys. Those are all the lenses that I'm using on my Sony a6300. Now, I know there's a lot more lenses out there for your Sony camera. You have Zeiss lenses and G Master lenses and all sorts of different focal lengths. But for me, I like to travel light, I like to be able to hike, I like to be able to camp, and by carrying these specific lenses, everything works out for me. And like I said, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything if I'm carrying those three lenses. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully it makes your lens shopping a little bit easier. So do me a favor, like this video if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more. If you have any questions, send them to me on Instagram at CodyBlue_. But until next time, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Have a great week.